Good afternoon. We'll actually start 1 minute early just to get going here because we may have questions about this as we go through here. First of all, I want to thank the budget team and all department heads and people that were involved in making the budget. You all did a great job coming forth and giving your ideas of what you wanted, what you needed. And I think everybody was very thoughtful in what the requests were for this year's budget. So I just want to thank everybody who did that. As commissioners, I think we should thank them for that good hard work. So we worked long and hard on this budget. Did I just lose my slide here, Greg? Did I hit something particular? I can see if it's not up there.
It's up on the screen.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So the highlights of the 2019 budget is that we're going to stay in public safety as we have in the past and continue to do. Police department lease on the Board of States electric corporate offices is moving forward quite nicely. As we all know, we're continuing to push the permanent flood protection in the city of Fargo and in-town levees as well. We're working towards a Red River water supply project and continue to look at different options of that. The new water treatment plant startup is this year. Focus on neighborhoods and code enforcement. We're making a huge commitment to that. We want to make sure that code enforcement is moved forward. We're also fostering strategic economic development opportunities. We have opportunity zones this year. We have a few other elements. We have a land trust and some different neighborhood initiatives that will happen. We'll continue to work on that. Opioid reduction efforts are working quite well, and we'll continue to work on resources to help us in those treatment areas. And this year, just so the commissioners understand, we've changed a couple things per your request. The general fund capital funded through capital project fund. So to try to isolate a little bit the capital projects and fund and how we do that to make it a little more simplistic, I think some have asked, you know, what is it needed for operations and what is it needed for long-term dreams and hopes. So our new initiatives is we reorganized the engineering and inspections department to get that more pure to what each department does. We are hiring a facilities manager, sustainability coordinator, and that person will help us move forward on all our different facilities. I think as commissioners, the constant question is what do we need to update, or what are the long-term outlooks here? What will we need to do in this area or that area? And I think our facility manager will help that, and also to give us kind of a timeline or schedule. Here's what we think needs to be done. Certainly the fire stations may need to be rehabbed. There may be other things that we have to do, but let's get a list of all our facilities and see what we could do. That also could be to how to make more energy efficient many of our departments or any of our buildings. So it would be a new hire for us to bring on that on board. The fit up Board of States electric building for the new Fargo Police Central headquarters. Unfortunately, the chief went over and saw Moorhead's new facility, so I guess we're going to have to make sure ours looks as nice, but we feel that the fit in that building is really good, and we'll get the things we need to get into the building. I marvel a little bit when people ask questions what they can do, but we're going to do some new lighting in a new facility. That was $230,000, and grounds and maintenance crew went around and looked and did that for $5,000, Chief, right? They went around and found some bulbs we could do it, so we just saved $195,000 just figuring out a different way of doing that. And that's kind of typical of our team here, I think. As employees, we look for better ways of doing things. Fire department should be happy with the new pumper truck that is coming out, and the other thing, we're going to do our competitive completion of a market personnel wage survey. So every 3 years we do a market survey, and we've completed that. So we'll see what that does to the changes. Performing Arts Center and Civic City Plaza Task Force has to get going, and that will be one of the initiatives of 19. I anticipate that task force should come out with some answers or recommendations to us. There's going to be some proposed utility rate increases, and I'll have the different department chiefs talk to you about that, why that's necessary. Wastewater treatment plant's going to expand. They had a public meeting last night here, and we had 10 people show up, so not a lot of people are too upset about our redevelopment of that. Potential redevelopment, police department, health department, redevelopment of the police department, health department, Park East departments, and Mid-America Steel locations. So those may be elements that we can put up for sale and garner some capital to pay for some of our capital needs. And then there's implementation recommendations from the Special Assessments Task Force that Goering and Grinberg should be able to bring to us for 19. The general fund revenue projections is up 2.2%. We go from 96 million to 98 million. There are a couple pops in there, and I'm going to have Kent comment to those, just so you understand anything over 5%, what's going on here. So Kent, if you want to address the license and permits and the different ones that have gone down, fines have gone down, and just explain that to the commissioners.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just will run through some of the notes. In your packet as well, there's a narrative explanation of slide 5 and slide 6 so that you can see the text behind that. But for the audience, I'll go through these really quickly. Property taxes, we're suggesting no change in the mill rate. We've done a significant reduction in the mill rate over the last few years from 58.2 mills down to 51 mills. So no change in that, but the natural growth in the mill levy produces $1.3 million, or about a 5% increase. Under license and permits, there are two very large projects coming through the process right now. The expansion of the wastewater treatment plant is, and the Block 9 project is two very large projects. We've anticipated the revenue that would come in on that and have assumed that the base revenue for building permits and other construction activity in the community will stay fairly solid. With regard to the state shared revenues, this one's a little bit more dicey in just the assumptions. The state, the largest of that is the state aid we receive from sales tax. And as you're aware, the U.S. Supreme Court just made a ruling with the Wayfair case that they're going to start taxing internet sales. We've made a modest estimation of the impact of that. And based upon the information that the state tax commissioner has provided us, we've populated about a $350,000 increase in that state aid, and as well as the highway funds that continue to increase. So what used to be falling revenues, the trajectory of that seems to be turning around, and the state aids are improving. With regard to fines, let's back up one. The charge for services. You're aware recently you approved a change in the special assessment policy, and as a result of that change, we delayed the entire water main replacement program for next year. As a result of that, there was about a $1 million loss of revenues as a result of changing that procedure and not funding that amount of capital. With regard to fines, we've had a consistent trend line of fines going down. This is typically and mostly traffic fines, and so this is an adjustment just to synchronize to the current level of enforcement. And it's my understanding in discussions with the police department that they've had less traffic enforcement than they've had in the past, probably due to other more pressing public safety issues. So that's just a trend to be aware of. Interest income is predicted to go up slightly as a result of a rising interest rate environments. The Federal Reserve is anticipating at least 2, maybe 3 rate increases over this next 16 to 18 months, so we've anticipated some of that. And under miscellaneous revenue, we have plugged in one potential sale of an asset, what we talked about in the previous slide. The Park East facility is about a 1.5 acre piece of property right now that would be, we believe, highly sought after for redevelopment, and we've done the math on that, and we think that's somewhere around $700,000 to $750,000 as a placeholder that we would sell that for development. That is plugged into your revenue projection.
Where is that located?
The Park East, which is just adjacent to the Gateway Mall on Main Avenue.
By the frying pan.
Yeah, by the frying pan. And so all in, the revenue's 2.1 million. Okay, hang on, let me finish that off. Transfers have been reduced. Transfers to remove, we've been supporting the general fund in the past 3 budgets with transfers from our revenue stabilization fund, and we've removed a $1.2 million transfer, and as well, we had transferred some vector control money that had accumulated a surplus last year, so those have both been removed. So bottom line projection is about 2.2%, and those are the major items within the revenue projections.
Any questions on revenue?
Is there, pardon me, caught me with a cookie. Maybe you're going to allude to this, but what about using reserves? Is that in the transfer line, or is there any of our reserve fund being used to balance this budget?
The 2019 budget is balanced, standalone revenues and expense, with no use of reserves in 2019.
And that is different from the prior 2 years where we did use a portion of reserve funds.
That's correct, yes.
General expense projections are, next is the major costs and where we're at, and requested expenses of 107 million, and proposed is 238, and that's an exchange of 1.9%. We've been holding back on some of our major capitals, but continue to be very disciplined in what we can add or not add at this time. And obviously, if sales tax increases, the revenues increase, or other things, we may be able to handle some of the capital. But for now, Bruce and Mike and Kent worked real hard with every department to see what are the absolute needs and what can we get by to wait for a bit. So you'll see that, and I think that's a great accomplishment to bring that down to that level of 1.9 for the growth of our city and what's going on. Kent, did you want to go on any of those items, or are you okay?
I'll comment on a couple that might jump out at you. Under the benefits section, you're aware that last year we bid out Blue Cross Blue Shield. We had a significant savings there last year. That happened just after the budget was approved. I think it was somewhere around the November timeframe, so those numbers weren't incorporated into last year's budget. So there's a sizable savings there. And with regard to rentals, that's a 40% increase. That's related to the obligation of leasing the Border States facility for the police department. So that's a hefty increase on a percentage basis. And the major supplies, 165,000. We've added some asphalt and some ice control supplies in the street department as a result of their needs to continue to maintain additional lane miles of streets in the city.
Energy and fuel costs have gone up from last year as well.
Yes, diesel fuel, we watch prices on fuel. We are contracting fuel and trying to lock prices and have saved using that strategy over the years. So that is one of the cost drivers there as well. Travel and education, that's not a huge number, but I just wanted to comment that includes travel, education, and dues. And there's been some additional dues incorporated into the budget for some other organizations, including the Emerging Prairies group as well. And under the unallocated, basically that's a placeholder for items that haven't been fully distributed into the departmental budgets at this point. And that's how we're doing that, just mechanically. When we get done with the budget, we'll realign some of those unallocated placeholders there. But the 1.9% is a very low overall increase in relationship to some of our past budgets. And just as a point of reference, I believe our budget growth over the last 3 years has been about 1.4%, which is probably less than the cost of living adjustment. So any questions on those?
Just a question and a comment. The police department, the building we're leasing, that is a lease to purchase, correct? Is there
I might have to defer that to the city administrator or the police department. We are leasing it right now with an option to purchase. I'm not sure that the lease payments are being accumulated for.
Yeah, Commissioner Grinberg, I can take that one. When we negotiated the acquisition of that Border States building, it's actually owned by a group called Red River Properties. 5 individuals that own the building. Border States is actually leasing it from them. And so when we met with them, they said, hey, look, this is a source of income for our group. We like making the transaction with you, but We'd prefer to lease it for another 10 years and give you the option to purchase at the end of that term. We negotiated that down to a 5-year lease term with the option to purchase at the end of that. So we will be leasing it for the first 5 years.
And that would be our plan, as we plan for resources or reserves.
Yes.
That purchase would be covered by signing this lease, so that we're not, whoever's here in 4 years and 6 months, faced with how we're going to find the money to pay for it.
Yes.
And then a second question, or comment rather, last year we started for the first time providing a mere $25,000 a year for economic development to the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC. And as we know, there's been leadership changes, and I know there's been discussion and thoughts about how do we accelerate our economic development strategies that Commissioner Pepcorn has shared often at the commission bench. And with a new leader coming into the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC and the Chamber joining forces with the EDC on what they tagged the Fueling the Future campaign, there are expectations that this is a public-private fund drive, and I forget what amount they're raising, but I expect that we'll be asked in City of West Fargo, City of Fargo, to complement the county funding for a growth strategy, economic development strategy for the area. So when I hear emerging prairies, that's a singular effort, and I understand that. I won't belabor that point at this point, but do we have any higher level discussion with staff about the economic development leg of the stool, if you will, and what's in that line item, training or travel and education?
Travel and education is a lot for the legislative meets this year, so we'll have a lot of travel over to that. The education funding for these departments are about pretty much the same. Your question is good because the Chamber is coming up with a $5 million, raise $5 million over 5 years, and the private's going to be $4 million and the public's going to be $1 million. So the question will come to the commission is how much do you want to get into that? And they're asking for a commitment every year for 5 years. So to me, it's a question of what the group wants to do, but it also goes to the question, Commissioner, the EDC wants money, Emerging Prairie wants, you got a lot of people at the table that want us to have some type of strategy towards that. Gilmore is supposed to help work with us on that to figure out where would you want to put some of your money or push your areas into that area. I know, John, you're wanting to get into a land trust, and we have some outside entities that will help us with that. So that's one of those questions I think the commission has to wrestle down, because we normally do our public funding, but we don't always get involved with private public when it's, I'm not sure where the Chamber is going to take Fuel the Future. I mean, if it's bringing more people into town, bringing homes, bringing employees, it may be something we get involved with, but it's something that I think it's a great question for the commission to figure out. And we haven't put any money in for that at this time. So. Personnel is always hard when you get through personnel. Everybody has a need and a want that they might need some more people. And the scissors hit the cutting floor on this one because we went from requests of the 29.75 and came down to 4.75. We've worked with everybody on this real hard to try to figure out what we can do, but we feel a little constrained in this budget because it does add a lot of people to that. On police, I'll just say since 2014, we've added 38 people to the police department, and last year we added 11 police officers, 1 police sergeant, and had a 1 cops grant as well. So we had a lot of people added, and people work at the airport also work part of the beats as well. So we I think the chief has done a great job of utilizing personnel. At present, we have 9 vacancies, which we have to fill, and we will continue to attempt to fill. I think we have pretty good chances on getting that halved. What we'd like to do in this area is mid-year of next year's budget, or this budget, relook at this, see if we can have any new people come on board at that time if the needs are there. So this is what we're proposing for 2019, and if the revenue and different things change by next June, we'd like to then take a relook at that, and do we need any more personnel? Do the police force, as they filled all their positions, now should we look at additional 3 or 4 officers, and we'll look at that hard. So on this, I think that we've added the people we absolutely have had to add to the going forward. You have in traffic engineering, we're moving some people and street lights around, but we really have kept this trim. Bruce or Mike, do you want to comment to that?
Sure. You'll notice the traffic engineering 5 employees that the proposal that you'll hear about in just a moment regarding the street and traffic light utility, removing 5 of those employees from the general fund and funding them through the utility. So you'll hear about that proposal shortly, but I wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Commissioner Peppercorn.
So I'm on the PEC along with you and Bruce, and to me, this is really difficult because now when the staff comes and requests positions, I don't believe there's a lot of fluff. And so for us to, I hope we can revisit it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, that I think if some of these potential additional revenues come in, I know we have to be careful about, and maybe Kent, if you can ask me about that, or answer a couple things. So you've anticipated some in the revenues, like for the sales tax, is that what you describe it? But like the potential with the legislature, if they change some of those things, that would drastically affect our budget, wouldn't it? And so I hope that we can revisit it, and to me, this should be one of the priorities, that we make sure that we address this, because I think that's not nearly enough, and I know it's tough. We have to be careful how we spend our money, but to me, we didn't really, I don't think we did as much as we would like to. At least from my perspective, I think it's tough, and so, can you just talk about
And it is
that?
tough, because we've really got about 10 to 15 employees every year, so we've been doing that. We think that we've made up for some of the areas that we did in the past. But we're a little concerned about resources this year, and don't want to get over, with Bruce's comment, get over your skis and then have too much, because personnel are costs that remains fixed for you after that, because you have to take care of those salaries and benefits. So next year may be a better year, but with the different elements that are going on this year, we felt that we wanted to be constrained in how many people we added. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. And just something I'd like to add to that conversation is, as we go forward, we have a pretty substantial outside consultant line items category, and whenever we can, I'd prefer to see us shift to our own personnel. If we see those moments and opportunities that we can do that, I'd rather have our own people as often as we can, rather than outside consultants. But consultants give you flexibility, but just something to weigh in that balance, because we do invest quite a bit there as well. And if we can do it with our own personnel, that's where I would land, when we can.
And we've tried to do that, John, over the years. Planning has been always, how many planners do you need, how many more people do you need to add, and we've continued to try to do that mixed with that. How many engineers do you need? So it's always a balance, because consultants you can hire for a set amount of time and you're done. You don't continue them on. So there were department requests for operations. So when you get into operations, different department heads will bring different things that they would like or need for their department. And again, this is a little bit of whittling to see what we can get by with and do. If you don't watch your operations, last year, Commissioner Grinberg, we went down 95% of the operating budget. So this year, we're keeping close, but the issue is that there's just things that the departments need, and they are in here. I'll let Bruce comment on that one. Or was it Mike that did operating?
Kent drew the straw on that one.
Ken?
Thank you for the straw. With regard to the listing that you have in front of you, I'll just point out a couple of items that we think are significant. Information services are requested almost $300,000, primarily to synchronize up a host of maintenance contracts on existing software systems that we use within the city. We have a long, long list of support software, and each of those carries a maintenance contract that might run 15 to 20% of the original purchase price of these contracts. So as we add additional software tools for the departments, we also add maintenance. So the $175,000 adjustment is an attempt to try to catch up on the funding so that there isn't a degradation in the funding for IT services. City attorney contracts are recommended to go up. This is pretty much a function of how the contract is written and the hours and the resource that the city attorney's office provides to the city, basically on a per hour basis. There is some savings inherent in moving into City Hall. You know, at the city assessor's office, $63,000 reduction. They were renting a facility that are in and leasing that and paying the utilities in a triple lease. And so that will be a savings as they move into City Hall. Buildings and grounds, This is largely additional cost for new facilities, the city hall, the BSI, the electricity, the insurance, the custodial care of new facilities, et cetera. Police department, as we talked about, you get to the next page, the $415,000, that's primarily the lease payment increase over the year. And I guess that's probably enough detail, unless there's questions about.
Any questions on the operating part? Then there's department capital request out of the general fund. So what we've tried to do is isolate this a little bit better for the commissioners. So we'll have department requests for capital that would come purely from the general fund. Is that yours?
Yes, thank you.
Bruce Grubb to explain.
This, a year ago, I brought the presentation from a year ago where we presented this idea where the general fund was loaded up with a lot of capital. All the general fund department's capital were residing there. Came up with this idea of moving a portion, a majority of that capital to the capital projects fund. Proposed that last year. That's how we're operating this year. So I tried to follow that same thought process, keeping the general fund capital number very similar to 2018, and as well in the capital projects fund, that number very similar to 2018. So there essentially is no change. There's a lot of detail in there. Fire truck is a big one. Mayor, if you could move ahead one slide, please. Can you advance one slide? Capital Projects Fund, yeah. Buildings and grounds, we're trying to centralize with the proposed buildings and grounds coordinator lead position, a coordinated effort to manage all of our facilities. We have a lot of those. Fire department, I just mentioned, a new fire truck. They're expensive assets, but needed. And then down at the bottom, you can see the equipment and vehicle replacement program, which is always a big component of capital projects fund, but those needs were presented by individual departments and central garage, and so as it resides today, those requests have been funded.
Any questions on this part? Mr. Gregg?
This money is still residing from the general fund? Is this a line item in the general fund?
This is in its own capital projects fund, and a year ago, we came up with the strategy to finance this through regional transfers from utilities, so that's how that's being funded. So this is not funded out of the general fund.
So then there were also debt finance capital, and there were a lot of requests in regards to that. And so our different departments brought those forth. And this is just for the commissioners to recognize that there's some capital projects going forward that may come before you. And it'll be a priority, what you think, or if we had extra revenue, what we might do. But you can see for $6.5 million worth of things out there that might need to be done in the future, we're funding 2.9. So we have some additions, and I know Chief Dirksen has also said there may be a fire station south sometime that we have to put in it that's not in this as well, and that's 2 million, 2.5? It's always more than, yeah, okay, thanks, bud. But anyway, those are the things that are sitting there, and I think that's just to have you aware. I think oftentimes you would say, well, Tim, what else is there that we need to do? And this is debt finance capital where we would put it in a bond and pay for it over time. But, Kent?
Yes, I wanted to comment on this as well. We're planning to debt finance this remodeling project. And also, as you recall, and I touched on this at the commission meeting the other night, there was a construction loan taken out when we built the community health center, the $6 million loan, and it was structured it was as a construction loan with a 5-year maturity on it. And we will be refinancing that loan. There's a balance of about $3.9 million remaining on that, probably in conjunction with this in a single financing. But the idea at the time, again, and this kind of ties into some of that City Hall discussion, the trajectory of the state aid changed, about the time we started getting into these construction plans. So that's why we took out the initial loan. And because the loan matures in 2019, we're going to have to refinance that piece anyway. But I just want you to be keenly aware that this would be debt financed as opposed to cash financed.
So the Georgetown Energy Prize, a $5 million check we didn't receive, we're going to try to get it another way. The other way we're going to try to do is grant funding. So we just are teeing up the different energy efficient things that we can do to try to get some of that money, in a sense, back to us. As you saw with Williams, 50,000 we put in for a project that's 600,000. That's a way of getting some of that money back. But Mike, do you want to comment to that?
I would just add, Mayor and Commissioners, these are not all projects that we might come up with. This is just an initial listing of projects, and as the mayor noted, there are some that are on this list that might have different cost share arrangements, such as the parking authority, that might not all be city at the end of the day. So this is just a placeholder to demonstrate that we do intend to seek some grants for the Georgetown University Energy Prize.
This is just for what it's worth. I understand the energy efficiency and goals around that, but my 2 cents, I think we should just, stray away from using this title, because when you do a Google search on what's gone on across the country with this, it's less than stellar as far as its how it was sold, how it was pitched, and what's the reality. So, my 2 cents on that is just to stray away from this grant, because there was no grant.
Well, we're going to get help getting the grant, Tony.
Well,
And Commissioner, if I could add too, I think that's a good observation, and one that our new facility manager, if approved in the budget, we really want to have that person tasked with looking after some of these projects. And I think your point is well taken, that this is going to be the city's prerogative, regardless of Georgetown and their involvement. This will be the city's prerogative for several years to come.
We could separate that.
just for what it's worth.
Yep.
Commissioners, you've always asked us to be timely on any type of fee increases and not to hit it all at once and to try to keep it a reasonable amount. You'll see some free adjustments that we're putting out there, but we're mainly hitting commercial versus single-family residents. So we're trying and attempting to do that. So I'm going to have each one of the department chiefs explain, because they came forth and presented their case to us, and I just want that ability for them to do that as well. For streetlights, Jeremy Gordon, I believe, is coming up.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. For street lighting, what the plan is I'm in charge of street lighting utility, which consists of 2 people, or it did in 2016. And I'm also in charge of 5 people that do traffic engineering maintenance out in the field, signals, signing. So at the end of 2016, we combined those 7 into one unit under one roof. So they've been operating as one unit since the beginning of 2017. But they're funded, 2 of the employees are funded out of streetlight utility, which was created at the end of '09, and 5 are funded out of traffic engineering, which is a general fund budget. So we want to bring them all under one department, all funded under one department, and then the proposed rate increase would also generate revenue, so we could bid out projects for simply repair and maintenance of the existing stuff out in the field, plus any capital needs, buildings, vehicles, etc. So that's really the 30,000-foot elevation. Today, the fees are $250 for single family, $2 per apartment unit, and $8 for commercial properties. We proposed getting the single family and apartment units equal up to $450. So one would be a $2 increase, one would be $250, and then the commercial doubling it from 8 to 16. So this does not eliminate special assessments for streetlights or traffic signals. This really just keeps in place what we have today. The projects would be LED replacements for both streetlights and signals. We've pretty much knocked out all the signals to LED, but we have all kinds of high-pressure sodium streetlights that could be converted to LED. You got to buy those, but it's 50% cost savings right there. Traffic signal rehab, traffic signal operations modifications. Hey, Jeremy, why don't you put a flashing yellow arrow at this intersection? Well, one of those costs $20,000 per intersection. So today we use infrastructure sales tax to fund a lot of this rehab or street rehab or some minor street light utility. If this is approved, moving forward, all the rehab stuff would basically come out of this fund.
Jeremy, can I ask a question? So to me, the single family, it goes from 250 to 450. That's a huge jump. And so, but at the bottom, there's an asterisk where it says residential fee increase of $3 per month. Can you,
That looks like it's just for the storm sewer one.
It's for
It
everything,
was for
Oh.
everything. Yeah.
because we go $1 here and $2.
Okay.
Yep. It's the
Okay.
two plus one,
okay.
the two up top and the one on the bottom for storm sewer.
All right, thank you very much. But to me, that just seems like a tremendous jump. What's the explanation? And to me, if it was a, whatever, 3%.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I got the number. So the street lighting budget today is right around 2 million. 1.2, that's electricity. The other is basically 200,000 for repair and maintenance, and then 200,000 for labor, and then $300,000 other. So 2 million bucks. Traffic engineering, the maintenance wing is about $750,000. So that's basically the 5 full-time employees, repair and maintenance, and a little bit of energy. So we'd move basically $750,000 for traffic to streetlights. So you have to generate $750,000 to fund just the labor and the repair and maintenance. And then the overage, getting up to 3.4 million that we generate would fund capital and repair and maintenance. So there is a decrease in, what I'm not saying is there is a decrease in the general fund by $750,000.
Thank you.
To Dave's point here, we're moving a lot of things around out of the general fund and into the utilities fund. So it looks like the general fund's only going up by 2% this year. We're raising the utility fund by a lot. And then we're asking the people of FAR to pay more for utilities in order to cover that large increase. So we're moving 5 people out of the general fund budget into the utilities. And we're saying, well, we need more money to fund those 5 people, so we'll do that without decreasing the general fund. Then we take the capital requests fund that was in the general fund, we move that out into a different fund funded by utilities, and then we ask for an increase in utilities. It's a huge shell game. And I'm going to do the math to figure out what the actual general fund budget is this year without those things being moved out. Because it's not going to be 2%, I can tell you that. It's going to be 5, 6, 7% more that we're actually spending this year than we did last year.
So, Commissioner, I wouldn't call it a shell game. We've asked on our utilities to make our utilities pay for themselves. You've also asked for utilities not to always transfer money over to the general fund. So the commissioners have asked to make it pure, what does what does where. Jeremy's asked is if his cost, if we're supplementing his cost for the general fund, he has a utility, that's streetlight utility, that's supposed to pay for itself. It's been the request of the commissioners to have the utilities pay for what their budgeted amount is. Otherwise, we are doing a shell game. We're moving money from our general fund over to cover the extra cost. You do that in wastewater, water, you do it in all your utilities. The utilities are supposed to stand on their own, not come in with a negative budget. So what we've done fiscally, we've always tried to make whatever utilities costs are, that's what you're going to be charged. $2 a month is not an outrageous amount of money, and we take most of this from commercial. In the city of Fargo, over 50% of the city is commercial. So you're actually helping the resident out by making more of the cost go into that. And when I get into the stormwater and sewer, you'll see that. So I'll go on to forestry. Ben Dow to explain.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Mayor. So what you have in front of you today is the work of a study that we did for over 2 years, an analysis based on our inventory of our street trees. We had KLJ to do the study for us on our fee analysis, and what turned up is we were charging $5.50 for the commercial and $4 for the everyday resident. With our analysis on the collection of data on how many trees are out there, we actually saw that the commercial was getting the better benefit than the residential was because of the boulevard space and stuff like that, but they weren't covering their own expenses. So in order to adjust our budget back in line with where it should be to charge the commercial appropriately, we're asking for a $8.50 increase a month to go to the commercial. In the past, we've always done a transfer from the solid waste utility or some other utility to prop up the forestry utility because it has not generated enough income. It generates right around that $1.8 million income, 1.75, and our current budget is pushing us to right to that $2 million mark. So we always saw somewhere in that $240,000 range transfer take place. With this adjustment to the commercial rate, just to affect the commercial, nothing to the apartments, nothing to the residential, will actually bring that forestry utility budget in line. There will not be a transfer anymore, and it'll stand alone. Any questions? Concerns? No? Okay. Thank you.
You're getting out of this today, Brenda? He's got it? One of the other comments you can make is if you want on your utilities, if you want to do it differently, you can raise a mill. I mean, this actually is better for the residents because we're not hitting everybody around there. So you can either pay out of the general fund, out of your mill levy increases, or you can pay to the utility what you're actually paying for. And streetlights have found to decrease crime. Police force came out with that, and that was very important. So we've made it a priority to get streetlights in the neighborhood. The other thing is when a streetlight goes out, Jeremy, how quick does it take to change the street bulb? 2 to 3 days. So next time I have one out, I'm calling you. But I mean, people want their streetlights taken care of. Forestry's the same, and I'll let you go through the stormwater utility.
Good afternoon. We started this process in 2017. We ran into a few wrinkles. We had some large numbers we kind of came up with originally, and we did have one brown bag with everyone present at the front counter. To start out, the original utility started in 1998. The last time that we actually did any raise to the utility was in 2002. We went from a $2 to a $3. Presently, the way that the stormwater utility is based is where you go by a water meter. If you've got a house, you've got a water meter, you get a $3 charge. If you have a commercial or a multi-family residential place, you'll have a charge of $15. Kind of arbitrary when they first set that up. What we're proposing to do now is actually go ahead and take the existing impervious area of each of the properties throughout the city, and on the commercial and the multifamily residential, and go ahead and if you've got a 60% residential, or 60% impervious property, you'll end up paying according to our tiered system, which is part of the, I think the third page of the handout. We've got 6 different levels. If you're 10% or less, you pay so much per 1,000 square feet. So what it ends up doing is on the commercial properties, say West Acres, they're 32 acres, they're 95% impervious. The multiplication factor then would allocate them approximately about $700 per monthly charge. Part of this proposal is also go ahead and give a increase to the residential side of just the $1, since we haven't had an increase since 2002. We'll bring in an additional $1.4 million to the utility. The reason for that is presently our capital project budget is only $350,000. One lift station can be in excess of $1 million. Several years to do one lift station. We have 80 lift stations to go ahead and maintain. That is, I guess, the biggest thing. We've got greater needs than what we presently bring in, so we're trying to redistribute and actually base it on something that's based on use, the impervious area.
So just comment on new development. So a lot of this takes in impervious if you have a big parking lot or a big institutional area. Right now, we put a lot of ponds in and different things in. So those areas that are following and building some stuff, will they have a less charge? So if somebody puts an office building up and puts in a ditch that hangs on to some water, is this going to be a lesser charge to them?
If they actually increase, we're going to have some credits available. The standard stormwater fee, we've got every property has state regulations on the water quality they have to maintain, along with the design of our storm sewer to keep the cost down, the size of our pipes, we try to keep it a minimum, so there's actually retention that's going to be required. So unless they go above and beyond and do some type of request on the credit side of things, their fees would remain at $4 for the residential and whatever the impervious value is.
The other question is that it took you so long to come up with a fee structure because you went out and visited with different institutions. Is that not true? And when they saw the first estimates of what they were going to pay, they fainted, and then you came back to them, right? Is that right?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we did have a meeting with the top 200 people that were affected. We invited them to 2 different meetings in the end of 2017. Of course, the biggest 4 that are hit are the people that have their own ability to assess mill levies, which is NDSU, the airport, Parks Department, and the school district. So we've had independent meetings with each one of those entities, even with the new school district person, and they've come to incorporate into their existing budget for the 2019 versus we were kind of on that tail end of it in June and July last time, so it kind of prevented us from pushing forward last January.
This is just in general, not just about the storm sewer, but when it comes, and my initial reaction is kind of like a deer in the headlights. These seem kind of substantial, these fees, and I hope we get to the point where we understand the nature of them so it isn't such a hit, especially to folks on limited incomes. But one of the things I've noticed over time is the definitions of, it's simplified, single family, multifamily, and commercial. Well, you might have one area where you have one big commercial entity that has a block or more, and they might get the exact same fee, $16 for, or $8 for a street light, or, you know, or the other fees. As a little commercial, there might be bunches of them around them. So if we can find some way to look for equity with these things so that a little tiny business isn't going to get hit the same as a great big institution.
And that's actually what we've done with the stormwater fee. If you go another page, probably on our handout, the one that was from the presentation in white, we actually got examples in there of different size parcels and based on different sections of impervious. So actually, presently we are charging $15 to say a small Hardee's or a small little, you know, pad site property. And if you look in there now, there's actually gonna be several people that are gonna go from the $15 down to the $8 because their amount that they're contributing is actually lower.
So this is more for streetlights and for forestry type applications
Okay.
than for the sewer.
All right.
You know, if you're looking at streetlights and you're currently at $8 and there's multiple of you on a block, and across the street there's one entity that gets the bill for the whole block, you know, that's not equity.
That's right. Thanks for the comment. There are other couple cities that do have streetlight and traffic, and they can break out the commercial. I think Mankato does 75 feet front width or less is a certain rate, and any foot over 75 feet, there's a multiplier. So we could look into that.
I would encourage us to, at the right time.
So Jeremy, that's his suggestion. What I ask you to do is check the revenue, what that might do to your revenue, because I think that's what you're trying to solve. John, $3 a month might seem like a lot, but we're a big growing city, inflation is happening, and unless we keep with our costs, you either have to increase your mill levy to cover those costs, or you have to do something else. All our department heads have asked to try to keep to their costs of what their utility is. So streetlights, it's streetlights, you know, and this is just how the city has run in the past. One of these we haven't touched since 2002. It's been 16 years. So the reality is for a homeowner, what they see is then what am I paying a tax for and what am I actually paying for? And that is covering the cost of that particular entity. Bruce Grubb has always wanted us not to have different elements in our utilities not to be able to pay for themselves.
And I don't see vector control in here. Does that mean there's no changes in mosquito management?
There's no change. No change in anything else. Either of those recommended changes.
Thank you.
So overall, the general fund budget for is 1.9%. We've gone from 96,368 to 98,238, and I think that's a progressive budget. It's constrained to meet the times of what the revenue is around, and I think we still are a growing city, and we have to continue to fund our city. This is a timeline of what goes forward. Sorry, we are getting down to a tight time. I have talked to you commissioners. I think Tony Garrick has a couple more things you wanted to talk to me about, but I have talked to the rest of you and trying to see if there's anything else you want. Please review that huge book you have in front of you and see if there's other elements that you think we can improve upon. Commissioner Garing had asked a little bit about, let's do a 1%, 2% cost of living or competitive market adjustment. My recommendation in this budget is 2%, but I'd like to go over that a little bit because I think sometimes we make assumptions, and John Strand, you were right the other day, some of you have been on the commission for a while, but maybe we didn't explain it to you as well as we should, and last time we really didn't discuss it. But we did do analysis last time this was requested, and we did do analysis this time as well. And I asked Mike and Jill to come forward and explain it a little bit of what why we do certain things and why we like to stay it a certain way. But we'll explain our rationale just so the commissioners have full flavor with this. Mike?
All right, great, thank you, Mayor. As the commissioners know, we're in a real competitive local market environment for talent, not only within the other local units of government, but as well as the nonprofit sector, the private sector. And our current pay structure is a reflection of that. We adopted this in May of 2011, and within that was a cost of living adjustment, what we also refer to as a competitive wage adjustment in the city of Fargo, a budget process. Our goal with our pay plan and our pay philosophy has always been to have integrity in that pay philosophy, to make sure that we're using market data, make sure that we're reflecting what's actually happening out there with other similar positions, with similar educational requirements and experience requirements. And the one thing that we've done for several years is applied that cost of, or competitive wage adjustment or cost of living adjustment uniformly across all of our pay grades, so that we have provided for all employees to receive the same 2% or the same 3% in any given year, maintaining that equity, maintaining that consistency across grades. And so what we did this year was spend a little bit of time trying to better understand, where we're at with our pay grades and with our employees. As the mayor noted earlier in the presentation, we will be doing some pay study work here next year. But the one challenge we have, and the commissioners, you're well aware of this, is that of our employee base, nearly 1,000 employees today, we have a lot of supervisors, we have a lot of working individuals on the front lines that are supervised by those frontline supervisors, and we've got a variety of people that are providing that service and are quite experienced in where they're at in our pay grade and in our pay system. What we found interesting this year, we just wanted to take a look at where our employees are at relative to their pay grades. So out of our 976 current full-time or part-time benefit-eligible employees, we actually have 221 of those employees who have been long tenured, who have got a lot of experience, and are at the maximum of their pay grade. And we thought that was really interesting because our competitive wage adjustment in putting 2%, for example, in the budget for 19 puts a little bit more runway in front of them, shows them some wage growth and some opportunity here in the organization. And we thought what was particularly interesting in public safety was we just wanted to look at that in isolation. 37 of our 136 active police officers are at top of range, and as well as the 21 of 76 of our firefighters. So we thought that was just a really interesting snapshot, and it, I think, illustrated the issue and the challenge that we have. Not only the internal equity, but then trying to, again, show our long-tenured employees an opportunity here that when they stay, that we're going to keep growing wages modestly over time, and we think that we've reflected that with our 2%. Across the board. But I'll refer to Jill, too, and Jill's done some good additional analysis here that she can speak to.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I would just add to what Mike has already covered, that we really, with the consistent across-the-board increase, that allows our pay structure to retain its current integrity. So we, when we're looking at a job and the placement within the structure and how those jobs move, we're really looking at both using our internal job evaluation tool as well as then comparing rates against the market. And so our current structure has an 8% spread between those maximums. And whenever we have a wage adjustment, we then move the entire pay structure according to that adjustment. So, the challenge is if our current structure wasn't necessarily built to accommodate a differing increase for a portion of the structure itself. So if we move in that direction, we may see some compression between particular grades, wherever that line would be drawn to implement differing wage adjustments. And again, depending on where you would draw that line, we would see potential compression, but also the issue of exempt versus non-exempt. In some cases, those non-exempt pay rates may begin to match or exceed the exempt pay rates at a particular level. So compression is probably one of the biggest considerations in that decision to, move to a graduated adjustment versus an across-the-board adjustment.
And I would just add, interestingly, 80% of the employees of the organization are actually in the bottom half of our current pay grade and pay system. And we've thought that was somewhat interesting because in that in that particular category of the 754, 221 of those employees, or 29%, are also at the top of their grade. So it's not just a public safety problem, it's not just a public works problem, but it's something that, organization-wide, we've had this perspective and viewpoint that we should try view it comprehensively and systemically.
And then, just so you know, this is the PEC book, and Dave, we looked at this, and all commissioners are welcome to look at this. At the beginning part, it sets up our pay structure and how it's set up and why it's set up. And there are different skill sets people have, so oftentimes people come and say, I think our position should pay more. So this is the Bible that we go through, and we went through, I don't know how many job descriptions this last year to go through that. We did do a market survey this year, and we found we're in market. We changed maybe 2 to 3 positions in the city of Fargo, and we always try to keep very aware of that particular aspect. So unless you're going to have performance reviews done every year in which you can performance review every employee in the institution and do that, or change a different product, even as Jill and I talk about that, that would take 3 to 4 years to do, because you have to get that all done. We're happy with our present structure. We had a lot more movement for 211, and maybe Ken could talk to that, but if you have a structure that people understand, and Mr. Garrick, I assume in the Guard, they have their structure as well, is then we all understand the structure and understand how it works. But my non-exempt, or my exempt people are here well past 40 hours. I think every one of my upper level people, I see him oftentimes working long hours to get whatever needs to get done. I don't feel it's fair to not reward them with the competitive market adjustment, but also what would happen if we do some different changes, it will change how the integrity of this program works, and then we're going to have people moving all over, which would mean a person you're supervising could be making more money than you, and that often sets up a lot of different things in the environment. John.
Thank you. Last year was the first year, I believe, in a few years where we had scheduled our salary adjustments for the entire fiscal year. I'm assuming that's the case this year?
January 1, yes.
And then the last question is, we were able to tell our workforce last year, I think you have a 2% increase generally speaking. What is that this year for 2019?
It'd be 2%.
It's 2% again?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
sorry. Yeah.
One last thought, or another question, I have another comment too, but help us, if somebody could help us understand the implication and the impact of our shift recently with regard to the funding of specials, where we had a $13.5 million change in our budgeting approaches with our percentage shifts. How does that impact this overall budget, and how does it come out into where the rubber hits the road? What are we seeing? Where are we seeing it? Where did this create problems and challenges, especially for us, or not?
Well, as we look at special assessment, especially for rehab, it's been going up every year, up to $28 million a year. The only way you can correct, we don't have to pay out $13 million in 1 year. We have to pay it out over 25 years in essence, $1 million hit. So what we've done is that on water main replacement next year, we've taken that out. That's how we can get back to that $1 million. If you do continue modest growth, well, we can help to handle that. But going forward, I think Brenda can talk to this, is that our CIP may not be as big. And depending on the commission, how a specialist commission goes through that, what they recommend. I think, Commissioner Grinberg, I've talked to you that there's other ways of raising revenue to cover specials that other people have put forth, and that will be discussed in that room. I don't know what changes will come out of that, but yes, that'll make budgetary changes to us if we have to do that. Oftentimes, the budgetary changes, you don't fund as much. So, I mean, it'll be a discussion of what we're going to change. Maybe we'll keep things as we are because people like the way that things are going. But for a city our size, I think as commissioners, you have to remember, we're growing. We're continuing to grow, and we have to take care of the city. And it's just like forestry when we've talked about it. We haven't touched that forever. In my neighborhood, I'm seeing all sorts of trees chopped down right now because of the ash borer disease, things that are going on. But go ahead, John.
And thank you for clarifying that that's spread over time. It's not just a one-time hit. One other informational item that would be helpful, at least to me, as we're going into this next stages of these next stages, is I'd like to know what the county and the cities and the schools, the parks and the counties are doing, just in a sense of, are they affecting their millage? Are they affecting their budgets? And then another picture that would help us is the bigger picture. You have the total millage for the region, but the city is only its part of the pie. And so just to have us see that in front of us of what is the county and the schools and the parks doing, and what's our percentage of what it looks like for the millage that the people will be seeing next year,
I'll ask Ken to ask that. Sometimes they do know what their mill levy they're going to ask, and we'll actually send that out to you as quick as we can, John, because we're getting the same budget we're getting into. They have to get their budget out. So I'll have Kent or Mike ask, and if we can get that to the commissioners, we'll get it to you as quick as we can.
Because a lot of folks think, well, you can really make an impact, but the reality is maybe 55% of your mills are to the schools, you know, and the parks and the cities and the cities and the counties share the rest. So if we can just get that bigger picture so it's right in front of us.
The other thing I wanted to mention too is that they changed the law a year ago and they started to do consolidated notices of tax increase. So all of those entities are consolidated into one bill. The county intends to send that information out August 31st, I believe. That helps you get a sense of that. But if you're asking if we would compile a listing of other budgets and budgetary growth, our finance department would be happy to pull that information together. And I think you're going to find our budget growth is very low when you look at cost of living and overall performance, especially in the last 3 to 5 years.
Mr. Grinberg.
Maybe Jill can come back up. Maybe it's a question more directed to her, but, you know, along the lines of compensation and market surveys and performance, you know, just about in every industry, there's major transitions going on with retirements, leadership skills, managerial skills. You know, I've had various encounters with various city departments over customer-facing issues that could have been handled differently, to management issues, how succession planning, if you will, within departments. We noted earlier the education and training line. We've talked about customer service, you know, with training for employees to be, you know, more customer service facing. Is that all part of the strategy in our budget this year with, you know, retirements, with their, you know, we have a lot of tenured people that are close, and transitioning a new age of new generation of leadership that doesn't have the experience that maybe the current makeup has, and how are we going to plan for that? Because it's affecting us, it's affecting every industry, and I just wonder if are we preparing for that?
Yes, we in HR, actually, just in the last couple of years, were able to add a training coordinator, which has been a great addition to the team. And we're in the process of planning for leadership training that we hope to sit down with our city administrators this fall and lay out a plan for leadership training beginning ideally yet this year and into next year, as well as working on customer service training and really determining what our vision is for customer service citywide. So those two training initiatives we plan to launch either later this fall or early this coming year. We also have the added tool that was approved during last year's budget of a learning management system called Launchpad within the city. And over the last several months, we've been implementing Launchpad. So by the end of the year, we should have all city employees on that system. So that really is just an enhancement to the face-to-face training that we can do. We can deliver training electronically right at someone's desk as well. So that it will be a great communication and training tool as we expand on that as well. So yes, we are planning for the future of leadership and customer service training and looking at a few different opportunities for how to deliver that training.
And Commissioner, if I could just add one comment on those first-time supervisors that you highlighted. We saw a real need, especially with so many new people getting promoted to those first-line supervisory positions, to try to gel that group. And so we are going to spend some time on that this year. It's in our work plan to try to convene that group, maybe not even monthly, but try to get them together to talk about our expectations and what we want to see, you know, from our supervisory staff.
Again, Tony, the commission has put out their customer service, and that's always been put out there, so we continue to push with HR to do that. So we have 1 week before we do the final budget. What I'd like you to do is, if you have any suggestions or comments on the budget, what you want to do, please tell Bruce Grubb, because according to open law, I can't take it all. I can take you each individually, but I can't take you as a group in a sense. So we tell Bruce, and then I can address individual issues with each one of you as you need to, and come back forth to the budget next week. Obviously, since you've got a week time, time goes by fast. So if there's some things that you really have heartburn about, please tell us, and we'll look at that. to Bruce and Mike and Kent and the people who worked on the budget, but this was a tough budget. This was a tough budget to get through. It just, there were a lot of needs out there that we would have loved to fund, but we just are constrained by our revenue. So I think it's a modest increase. I think for a city our size, we did fantastic on this budget, but I leave it at that. Dave, you had a comment?
Just real quick, so Mike, it's a hypothetical question. So if we approve the budget, what happens if we get a significant change, either through the legislature or with sales tax revenue?
Well, one of the things we had recommended is that as a commission, we would meet again as the year went on to have some adjustments. You could do mid-budget adjustments. So if a revenue went up, obviously you might want to do some funding, you might want to do some capital projects, that would be the way to do that. All we know of the budget, you can't go any higher than that. So if we put in the budget next week, we can't go any higher than that. We can always go lower than that. For instance, there's the Link bus that I think somebody has fond affection for. Somebody might come back and talk to us about the Link bus. Well, it's in the budget, but it can come out of the budget. So those types of things can be held.
That's my question. So if you just said you can't go above that budget, but if we get additional significant revenue, that's going to go above our budget, correct?
You can readjust your budget, but that's not going to affect the taxes. So what would happen if you did an adjustment, you wouldn't affect anybody's taxes.
So the slide there, August 10th, approved preliminary budget, we can have a special meeting or?
Yes, at noon on Wednesday next week.
It's August 8th.
John?
It-
What?
August 8th.
8.
I'm assuming in this budget report compilation, I will clearly see where our reserve fund is at relative to
Yeah,
last
that-
year and going forward.
That information is in the booklet.
In a nutshell, what's it look like?
We're seeing a bit of a draw of the general fund reserves in this current period. You see that dropping to around 34 million, and there's been just a series of adjustments, excuse me, since last year that roll into that. Part of it is how we carry over our capital from year to year. So for instance, if there's $2 million in capital outlay in the 17 budget that doesn't get spent, it gets carried over and the budgets get moved forward. So from year to year, there's a shift in that. Just trying to think you'll see in the special revenue funds, those have gone down significantly as a result of the Rolco ramp project. We're drawing funds out of the parking authority to pay for that cost, and I think there's still some obligations remaining there. So you'll see those down some, but we're still carrying a very positive fund balance overall. I believe it's around 33 to 34% of the general fund expenditure, so we're still exceeding our goal on reserves. But one thing I did want to point out is, I don't know if this came through on this or not, but our revenue stabilization fund has been exhausted. There's no money left in the revenue stabilization fund, which was set up as kind of a secondary rainy day fund.
And how much was that?
At one time, we peaked at about $5 million, and so we've drawn out of that. But ironically, as I sit here and think about how revenues are playing out, it seems as though we exhausted that fund about the time that the state revenues are starting to pick up. So the whole strategy of having a rainy day fund and actually being willing to use it, the timing seems fairly appropriate. So all I'm saying too then is, as we move forward, you might want to make a decision about, do you want to replenish the rainy day fund, or that should be visited during these budget discussions as well.
That's, in my opinion, that's a no-brainer, yes. We need a rainy day fund. If we've depleted it, that's just strong fiscal management.
Well, I think for a city our size, with the size of budget we have to remember a lot of our stuff's are in millions. It's not in hundreds or $200,000 bites. Well, thank you. I've gone over time, but we can have further discussion anytime, and thank you for your interest. And I want to thank the commissioners for helping out with this. You're all experienced commissioners, so I think you know how to do a budget, so thank
What
you.
is what?
A variety of things have happened this week. The Mayor's Blue Ribbon Commission on Addiction will host a Take Back Tuesday event tomorrow from 1 to 4 on the sidewalk outside the main entrance to the Fargo Cast Public Health. This event allows area residents to dispose of unused, unwanted, over-the-counter and prescription medications. Each time we have this event, I'm surprised how many people bring in grocery bags full of medications. Library. The library's annual summer reading program ends on Saturday. Some events this week includes author R.C. Rendon will sit down with the Downtown Library at 7 p.m. Wednesday for a reading and a talk featuring her mystery novel, Murder on the Red River. There will be free family movie on 1 p.m. Friday at Carlson Library, and more beginner yoga sessions for adults are planned in August. The library is adding board games to its circulating collection, and anyone with a valid Fargo Public Library card can check out board games such as Clue, Vanagrams, Settlers of Catan, Ticket to Ride, and Farkle. Planning. Events are planned at Rambus Park from 5 to 7 on August 5th to celebrate the opening of the World Garden Commons and Prairie for the People, part of the Fargo project. A variety of ecological and cultural activities are planned, including the mini powwow, garden tours, music, art projects, and scavenger hunts. If you drive past there, it's really come along, and it looks kind of like a jungle almost, but it's very nicely restored. The Fargo Native American Commission is seeking Fargo residents who have made outstanding contributions to the indigenous peoples of the city of Fargo. The deadline for submitting nominations is the Planning Department is September 1st. The award will be presented to the recipient as part of the events of the Indigenous Peoples Day, October 8th. Police Chief Todd is jealous because the mayor jumped out of an airplane and he didn't get to do that. The police department held a retiree invite back event recently at the new station. Nearly 60 retirees and their spouses attended the barbecue and tour of the new facility. Chief Todd said it was an opportunity to see familiar faces and let them know they are valued. He said it was a great time and he got a lot of positive feedback and thanks, and so he's going to try to make it an annual event. 60 people, that's quite a few. How many do you have in that department now? Always remember, don't ask the question unless you know the answer. Chief Todd spoke at a recent Cass County Commission meeting regarding the state radio project. He said the current radio system in Fargo will be at the end of its service life at the end of the year and will need to move forward to a new system now. He said North Dakota is one of the 2 states in the country that does not have a statewide radio system. And that's really important for communication when different departments work together from all over the state, right? How much would it cost to do a new system? $220 million.